everybody. Welcome back from the break. We're nearing the end of the conference. I hope that everybody's had a great time the last 3 days and have learned a lot. There's been amazing content, great connections to be made. So I hope you've had an opportunity to soak all of that up. And hopefully we will continue that with this panel. You have joined today practical advice integrating pets to achieve positive outcomes for all. And by the way, my name is Susan Riggs. I'm the Senior Director of Housing Policy for the ASPCA in the Government Relations Department. And this is a new role for the ASPCA. It's just a little bit over a year ago that the ASPCA decided to really devote serious resources to developing a campaign to remove barriers to pets and housing, understanding that it really is a challenge, regardless of where you are on the economic spectrum, but certainly for, folks that are, in communities of color, lower income folks in particular. And so we're really seeking to find solutions to intervene to make sure that pets and people can stay together. As an advocate for co-sheltering, we all are primarily concerned in the short term with removing unnecessary barriers that serve to keep pets and people together in precarious and even dangerous situations. But once we are successful in identifying temporary housing that removes those barriers, we appropriately turn to providing the support and resources that ensure that both people and their pets are set up for long-term success. From behavioral support to short-term boarding, our panelists will suggest operational shifts and key partnerships that can make all the difference in ensuring that long-term success. During this workshop, you'll learn practical tools for ensuring that co-housing sets clients up for success, wherever your community is in co-housing. Join us to hear practical advice on what has been helpful and not so helpful in ensuring that pets and people can live and thrive in harmonious shelter and support environments and set a strong foundation for moving towards permanent housing solutions. So with that, let me introduce our panel. During this workshop, you'll be hearing from the distinct experiences of Andrea Carter, a seasoned practitioner of co-housing, Kirsten, Jewell, a new adopter of co-housing, and Genevieve, Frederick, a critical partner in providing pet side support. So first, Andrea Carter is Director of Interim Housing for Path Partners in Los Angeles. In this role, Andrea oversees 6 shelters, leads a team of over 100 professionals, and provides services for over 100 guests. Path Partners was an early adopter of the co-housing model for serving its clients, and Andrea has a wealth of experience to share with you today. Then we'll turn to Kirsten, Jewell. She is a manager of the Housing and Homelessness Division of the Kitsap County Department of Human Services in Kitsap County, Washington. In this role, Kirsten oversees strategic planning, manages the portfolio of investments of public funds, and facilitates special projects. The most special, in my opinion, among these is currently the design and construction of the county's first co-housing facility. During our preparation, Kirsten shared that she has been pleasantly surprised at the number of partners that have stepped up to support the project. She has come prepared to speak to the importance of these partnerships. And last but not least, after a long and fruitful career in sales and marketing, Genevieve Frederick founded Feeding Pets of the Homeless in 2008. The organization was the first national animal organization focused completely on feeding and providing emergency veterinary care to pets of the homeless. She has built the organization into an indispensable partner for ensuring that the needs of pets are being met so that they can continue to provide much needed support and companionship. So thank you all again for joining. Before I turn it over to Andrea, I just wanted to remind everybody that we'll be taking questions at the end of the panelist talks. So please feel free to drop your questions into Whova, which I've now figured out how to use. And if you want it to be directed to a particular person, feel free to include that as well. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Andrea. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, and hello to everybody. I am very happy to be here today. As Susan said, my name is Andrea Carter. I am the Director of Interim Housing with PATH, People Assisting the Homeless. I oversee 6 different interim housing shelters, and we actually have an amazing pet grant that we received our first time in 2020, which was for one of our shelters, which is located in Venice. That was very successful. And then we were awarded a second grant, which in 2022, which then expanded to 3 amongst 3 shelters, which is Venice, our Los Feliz shelter, and our YWCA shelter. So, with this pet program, we basically made adjustments to our programs with how do we incorporate having animals in our program and the transitions of supporting and living and providing services for our clients along with their 4-legged friends, which is their pets. So when I first started working with PATH, it was a lot of struggles. We are a low barrier program. So, we really tried to work hard on how do we create less barriers for our guests. Some of the biggest things that would pop up would be clients who would, want to come off the streets, but had animals. Not all their animals were service animals, so they would have troubles with having, to get a service letter, or were emotional support animals. So they would have trouble trying to get that as well, those letters. So eventually we decided, let's not create barriers when it comes to their pets. A lot of people came in then, just having pets, and it was kind of a learn as you go, dealing with different types of pets. We try not to have any barriers with the type of pets we had come in. We've had everything from parrots to rabbits, to dogs, to cats, to rats, to hamsters, I believe, yes, turtles, fish, everything. So it was beautiful to see just the array of different types of animals we had coming in. And then also just not all the hoops, people would have to jump through. So it was just really nice that people were able to come in, not have to worry about, I can't come in without my pet or whatever the case is. We would do, we then created an intake for the pets as well as their owners so that we could get to know their pets, right? So we then started learning about, what are the questions we should ask? What do the pets need? When was the last time the pets had health care, vet care? When was the last time they've been seen? So there was just an array of different things that we started learning as we started allowing more pets to come into our shelters. The hiccups we were having, the things we had to talk about in the beginning, leashes, animals needing leashes, and how do we deal with cats in the shelter, how do, that are not in cages or things like that. Cleanliness, just learning that along the way when you're dealing with different people, we've experienced a lot of amazing things, especially with this pet program. We got funding. The funding provided amazing resources where we were able to pay for like vet care and a lot of the stuff that was really difficult for our clients, to pay for, and vaccinations, and flea treatments, and different things like that. Some of the things that we still are working towards is like getting grooming for them, because the funding doesn't pay for everything. So that's where a lot of these other amazing resources come in, where you have these other nonprofits or these other organizations who are super supportive, that come in and are like, here, we can help with, cages, we can help with food, we can help with, and then you just balance, how do we use this funding in areas that we really need it for our guests? And then how do we get connected with our sister partners, right? Our sister or brother partners with all these other nonprofits and stuff. So it's just connecting and getting a lot of amazing, support from different organizations. And then just teaching the basic skill sets of what does it look like to be a good neighbor? In the shelter, what does that look like? People are coming from the streets, so there's a lot of behavioral things and a lot of behavioral adjustments that need to be made for some of our pets, where, they may have been the protector in the streets, which is understandable. Sometimes even the dogs or the cats or the pets dealt with trauma in the streets and different situations in the streets. And, now they're coming into a shelter, which is a different environment. So let's make adjustments as well as the people coming off from the streets. So helping with that trauma, helping with the adjustments of learning and, being now under a roof and following certain requirements and regulations and what do we have to do? And now we got to pick up poop after our dogs. We can't just let them poop and walk away. And providing them poop bags and providing them leashes. You can't just let your dogs walk around without a leash anymore because you're in a building and, some people are scared of dogs. Some people, not because, a dog is mean, but because just people are scared, right? And then what does that look like when you move into permanent housing and for the landlords, right? When you move into permanent housing, you can't just let your dog poop and walk away or, so having those conversations and those teachings and educating and just the different stages and levels of what does it look like having a pet. So I don't know how much I could talk or not talk. I could talk all day, but that's kind of what it looks like in an interim housing shelter, also working with our staff, like I said, getting connected to different services and working with both, the pet parent and also now we're taking on what does it look like when we're working with the pet. Some of the biggest struggles I will say we've encountered is when we have some of our clients needing to go to doctor's appointments or needing to go to the DMV or needing to go to the Social Security office, whatever it is, and being denied allowing them to take their pets with them, right? In a lot of cases that creates barriers when people are trying to get back on track and get their lives together and do what they need to do. And when, sorry, can you? Yes. And, just getting back together, getting their lives back together. And then, they're always worried about their pets, right? Where do they leave them? What do they do with them? Sometimes they have to be gone for 2 to 3 hours at a time. Who's going to walk them? Who's going to feed them? Whatever the case is, they got to take the bus sometimes. And then they got to worry about, that's longer duration. So those are some of the barriers. Grooming has been some of the barriers, obviously taking care of their skin care and their hair. We've received a lot of animals who come straight off the streets and they're matted if they have longer hair. Nail care, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this before, but sometimes their nails will grow into their skin if they're not getting the proper, nail trimming, a lot of ear infections. So there's just so much that comes along with it and the education that comes along with it. So that's kind of what we've experienced, and I'll be open to questions later because I don't know how I could go on forever, but thank you guys. I'm happy to be here and I hope I shared enough.
Thank you, Andrea. Yeah. So just a reminder, we've got one question in Whova, but please, as things occur to you, please post them in Whova and I'm monitoring that and we'll circle back around. So with that, I will turn it over to Kirsten.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kirsten Jewell. I'm the Housing and Homelessness Division Manager in Kitsap County, which is a smallish county across the Puget Sound from Seattle. So if you're in Seattle and you want to get to my county, you have got to take a beautiful Washington State ferry across the water. My role is primarily as a grant administrator and community coordinator of efforts around housing and homelessness in our small community. When I say small, our county is about 270,000 people total. My journey to co-housing began, I think, in a couple of different ways. The first is around an initiative that we've been working on to try to bring a trauma-informed care lens to all of the sheltering programs in our community that we fund. And one of the things that we kept hearing is that some of the barriers that people have to accessing homeless shelters are around the 4 P's. So pets, possessions, partners, and privacy. So these are some of the things that people get concerned about as barriers to wanting to go into shelter or being able to participate in shelter, even if they want to. So we were looking at how do we reduce those barriers. The second thing that we looked at is some data. I love data. I'm a data geek. And we collect information each year during an annual point in time count survey, where we try to go out to find all the people who are living unsheltered in our community during a 24-hour period. The federal government has some data that we're required to collect, but we also collect local data that's useful to us. And we ask people questions about whether they've tried to access shelter services, and if so, why are they not currently in shelter? And if not, why not? And when I was looking at that data, I found a couple of things that kind of reinforce this idea that we have some pretty significant barriers. One of those is that people were saying that they were being turned away from shelter because they had companion animals or pets. And the shelters just weren't designed or able to accommodate those animals. And we also had a big shortage of shelter beds for humans in general. Like, we just don't have enough beds to accommodate all the people who are trying to survive outside. So based on this information, our county took a pretty unusual step for our county government, which is that we talked to a bunch of our social service providers in the community about the need for another large-scale shelter that could accommodate animals. And the response we got is that really none of them had the capacity to take on that kind of a project. So the county government decided to purchase a building and ourselves renovate it into a shelter, which we will then contract for shelter services to be provided by a nonprofit. And we decided from the very beginning that this was going to be a co-shelter, but had no idea what that really meant. So we ended up purchasing a 20,000 square foot fitness building. It has a full-size gymnasium and aerobics rooms, locker rooms, showers. It's on a big wooded lot with a big grassy backyard. So it really seemed like an ideal kind of base building to start with to create a shelter. And the shelter is called the Pacific Building, or the Pacific Shelter. We are in the process of remodeling it. We've hired an architect engineer to do the design work to convert it, and we've submitted permits, and we're sort of stuck in permit limbo. And hopefully after that, we'll get going on actual renovations of the project. The facility is going to be designed to hold up to 75 people, which will include men, women, non-binary people, couples, families, children. Basically, it's an everybody shelter, and it will be designed to accommodate animals as well. We did a little bit of planning around what percentage of people coming into the shelter might have an animal companion that we should accommodate. And we settled on trying to accommodate up to 10 dogs at a time, and about 8 cats, and then sort of assorted smaller creatures like hamsters and rabbits and ferrets and things like that. So we're planning for roughly 20 to 25 animals at a time. And I think one of the things that has been interesting in the design process is that it's really a different proposition to plan for each of these different kinds of animals. It's not just one size fits all in terms of accommodation and what their needs are, but you really have to think through the different needs of these different kinds of animals individually, in groups, and in relationship to each other. So one of the things I definitely have been on a very steep learning curve around the project design is trying to incorporate living accommodations for these animals, which need to be specific to the type of animal. When we've been doing the design with the architect and engineer, we didn't have any experience doing a co-shelter design. And we've been really learning a lot, primarily through developing partnerships with organizations within our community. So luckily our architect and engineer firm has been very receptive to this concept. They did a bunch of research themselves on co-sheltering, but we also have been able to assemble a group of veterinarians and animal care experts to be an advisory group for the project, so that they have been helping us think through some of these really critical questions around design considerations in the facility, as well as kind of the considerations of how to care for the animals afterwards once the facility is operational. So we've designed this advisory group. We've also reached out and formed a partnership with the Humane Society locally, who are wonderful. They've already donated some things for the shelter and are themselves launching an animal life-saving care center where they're able to provide low cost or free veterinary services to some households. And so our plan is that when people bring their animals into the shelter, the volunteer veterinarians will be able to see the animals on site for some very basic intake and assessment. And then once they are, if they need more care, we'll be able to make a referral to the Humane Society, who will help people with sort of more intensive or high-level animal care and interventions. We had no idea, though, that there was this larger, amazing community of all of you out there in the wider world who have a lot of experience with co-sheltering and a lot of resources available. So our eyes have been opened, and we've really had wonderful experience and wonderful support from the ASPCA and My Dog Is My Home and other local shelters in the Washington State area that have been doing co-sheltering. And we've just found this amazing supportive community of people who are really working to make this the norm rather than the exception in their communities. I wanted to provide just a couple of quick observations, or let me talk about a couple of design considerations that we worked through, and then a couple of observations about the broader endeavor. As I talked about, we talked about what animals we would be able to accommodate and how we would meet their basic needs, their both their day-to-day needs, their accommodation needs, and their veterinary care needs. We're able to have a large dog run in the backyard, and then even potentially a little bit of an off-leash area. And so trying to figure out the policies and procedures for managing that, as well as how to work that into the design of the shelter, has been very important. We've talked a lot about kind of how to set up an operational kind of agreement for the animal owners to be made aware of their responsibilities, as Andrea talked about, with when they're having their animal with them in the shelter. What are their responsibilities around that? What is the shelter going to provide? What are they responsible for providing? What resources can we bring in from outside to help? All of that has to be kind of written into policy, and people who are bringing their animals into the shelter have to agree to those things. And then we've just recently also been grappling with issues like insurance. There's some insurers are apparently reluctant to insure co-shelters, which I think is definitely an area that could use a lot more advocacy. And then the other thing that we've been kind of trying to address is some of the larger community concerns around this. There's a lot of the shelter is located adjacent to a neighborhood. And so, as you can imagine, there's just sort of like general outcry about, oh my gosh, we're going to put people who are unhoused living next to us. And we've had a lot of community pushback on that. Some of the pushback is interestingly less intense when we talk about the fact that we're going to have animals in the shelter. Some people think this is a great idea. So even though they're not in favor of a human shelter, human only shelter, they're kind of are more receptive when we talk about it being a human and animal shelter. So that's been very interesting, but there are still some concerns about all of a sudden plopping down 20 animals, in one building next to a neighborhood, and how are we going to make sure we contain the noise and the waste and the increased traffic and all of that. So there's definitely some considerations there as well. Just a couple of kind of global observations, and then I'll wrap up. I definitely went into this project with a huge amount of naivete. It's not something that I've never developed a shelter building before ever myself, and I certainly have never done a co-sheltering one. I think it really is a lot more complex than I had anticipated to essentially design a human shelter and an animal shelter in the same building, plus the interaction and intersection of those two. I think I would definitely go into the next one with a little more open eyes about what it takes to do that. Obviously, it's ideal to be able to design a shelter from scratch, and you can make sure that the design meets all of these needs of these different, animals and people. But all along, our motto has been like, don't let the perfect be the enemy of taking action. So even though we don't have the perfect setup and the perfect, room availability and all of that, we're still moving forward with trying to make sure that this project is successful. We have found a ton of community support, and I definitely think that there's a lot of support out there to leverage, including grant funding. The funding that I am used to working with doesn't really let you spend it on animal care and animal facilities. So what I've found is that we are having to come up with two different funding streams for the capital part of the project. We've got to come up with giant chunks of money to renovate the building. But we have to kind of come up with some smaller chunks of money to actually deal with renovating the animal part of the building, because the people who are funding the people shelter don't really want to fund the animal shelter. I think that's hopefully going to change over time, but that's how it is right now. So we've had to find some different funding for those different shelter capital costs. And the same is true with the ongoing operational support. So there's sort of the funding that I'm used to working with isn't for caring for animals, it's for caring for people. And so we're going to have to figure out how to find that ongoing operational support to continue those volunteer veterinarians paying for food and, cleaning supplies and all of the kind of pet care things, as well as the costs that might come with providing more insurance and all of that. So I hope some of those considerations are part of your thinking if you're interested in going into a co-sheltering project. It's definitely super rewarding, and I would do it again and again, but there are some things to think through, and there's lots of resources to help you if you're interested in that.
Thank you, Kirsten. I'm already hearing a couple of themes that I can't wait to hopefully tie into a bow when we get to the question section. But I did want to do this one shout out, because Kirsten, I think what the point you raise about funders, we've got, hopefully there's some funders in attendance today. We've got to break down the silos. We've got to start thinking holistically about how all these pieces fit together, and not just funding in silos and particular elements, knowing that, people don't live in silos. People live in the world, and there's a lot of complexity around living in the world, including their love for their pets. So I'll get off my soapbox now and turn it over to Genevieve. I know that she's going to have some really exciting things to talk about in terms of the pet side stuff. shifting our thinking to, okay, what do we do today? So once we've got folks into co-housing, with their pets, and they're at least out of harm's way, they're off the streets, they're out of danger from potential domestic violence, we've got them housed. The next goal, of course, is to move them to more permanent housing solutions. And thinking about the themes that I heard in your 3 conversations, one is the health and behavior of the dog. And those 2 things are, of course, inextricably linked. A lot of times, if a dog has been injured, if it has had has not had regular veterinary treatment, it might be in pain. So oftentimes behavioral issues come from the fact that they have an injury that's been untreated. So obviously, like the medical treatment and the behavioral treatment for a pet is really important as we think about, moving towards more permanent housing solutions. Andrea, you had mentioned things like, educating clients to make sure that they understand that as that they, move through the housing ladder, that they're going to have to think about things like picking up poop and, all of those practical things that that need to happen in order to be a good tenant and to be a good neighbor and to live in a harmonious community. And so that's kind of the theme that I've heard on the pet side, is really just, making sure that we're providing the clients and their pets with the resources to make sure that the pets are healthy, they're happy, that they are able to thrive in permanent housing. The other thing that I heard is kind of on the support side. Many folks obviously become homeless, or chronically homeless, or even for a period of time because of some underlying issues. It could be untreated substance abuse. It could be mental health issues that have been untreated, or maybe not under treatment at the moment. So obviously that requires that we provide some support. And as Genevieve was just talking about, how do we make sure that a client can be fully present during those appointments? If they're worried about where their pet is, if they don't feel comfortable having the pet in another location where they don't have eyes on it, maybe they even need literally the pet in their lap in order to feel calm and feel comfortable and engaged in a conversation that is really important to their long-term success. So I think, that's one piece of it. But even beyond that, there are a lot of necessary appointments. I think Kirsten had mentioned, going to the DMV, going to the SSI, going to get your social security card, getting a driver's license, all of those things that are really fundamental to, transitioning to permanent housing or supportive housing. Those types of things, those interventions seem to be a really strong theme. I'm also seeing in the chat, some conversations going on about, providing crates for appointments, maybe offsite or onsite, having the crates available. And then I think encouraging social service providers to accept pets or under some conditions. So those are not necessarily questions, but I want to open it up. Yeah, please, Kirsten.
Well, no, I was just going to comment that one of the things that we have been thinking about and working into the design of the Pacific shelter is some kennels, so that if we do have people who are shelter residents and they do feel comfortable leaving their animals while they go out for appointments, there is a way that they could safely leave them for an hour or two in a safe environment, and we would work out a way that the animals would have some supervision while people are out doing their appointments. So sometimes that works well. Some facilities just will not take an animal no matter what you do. So we want to make sure that if somebody's got a job interview or needs to go to the bank or something, that there's a way that they could leave their pet briefly.
And just to piggyback, I think honestly, one of the basic steps of 101 is education, even just for staff and employees and these businesses. And, I seen so many barriers come in so many different avenues that it's like, if we get them past this door, then there's another door. or you get them past this. Now there's we provide transportation, but then this Lyft driver doesn't want their animal in their car. There's just so many hiccups and barriers, and it's constant advocating in so many different ways that I just feel it's like you need an advocate just for animals to be like, look, this is so important, people, this is so important for us to be able to, to get our guests or our clients to the DMV. If they can't get their IDs, they're not going to get nothing. They're not getting a job. They're not going to get to go back to school. They're not going to get an apartment. It is the basics that people need. We all know that. And I know I wouldn't want to, Genevieve, you were saying, I would never tie my dog outside. I would say, nope, I'm not going in there, So I think it's just the human side of us connecting to what would you do? How would you feel if you were in this situation? And, with PATH, I really feel like that was the model we had and the vision we had, especially with my staff, where it was like, think of yourself. How would you treat your family? If your family, how would you want them to be treated if they had, like you said, a dog that they've been with 24/7, and that's all they have, right? And now you're asking them to say, tie your dog outside, or you can't take your dog. And that's been all their animals have actually been their motivation for them to keep going, to get their lives together, to have better, so I really feel like a lot of it is the basic 101, just starting with education for all of these businesses and all of these different organizations on just relate it to yourself. And so many people have animals, and we all love animals, and it's like, but there's a disconnect for some reason, where we put our animals and make our animals the most amazing, thing in our lives because they're so happy and they bring us joy. But then when it comes to people who are unhoused or experiencing homelessness, it's like it's different for them, So I just feel like that's like, we got to take it back a little.
Genevieve, did you have anything to add, or I can go to the next question?
No, I think she's right on point that it's important that we have, and when, we're talking about co-sheltering, there's a lot of pieces that are involved and a lot of organizations that need to be part of it. I know when we do wellness clinics here in my own little town at the local food bank, we involve the Humane Society, the city, and a organization that does spay and neuter, because that isn't one of the things that we normally do. When there's an emergency, if the animal's going to be under anesthesia, we'll ask the doctor to get permission to spay and neuter from the owner. We always ask them to update or give vaccinations while they're there, which we'll pay for, so that when but at these wellness clinics, they come in and we usually try to get a groomer there. So the dogs toenails are cut, mats done, vaccinations, a basic exam. At all of our clinics, if the doctor during the exam sees something that he or she can't handle on site at that location, they will let us know and have that person call our office. Then it becomes what we call an emergency case, and we'll get that animal in. It could be an ear infection that they don't have the antibiotics there. It could be all kinds of things that happen. A lot of it is dental, and that is very expensive. If you've ever had your dogs go and to have their teeth cleaned and removed, it's quite expensive. So we pay for that as well. But when those people in our little town leave, they've got a dog license they've got a voucher for spay and neuter, their dog's been vaccinated. It's kind of a one-stop. I know there's some others out there that are doing in their communities. They're adding the other component, the human component, to helping these people as well, giving them their vaccinations and giving them resources for whatever the human needs. So yeah, there's a lot of pieces that come in for what these two women are doing by co-sheltering, and I applaud them.
So one thing that strikes me is, I think probably everyone in the housing sector is familiar with the intake process for the human side. There's been a couple of allusions to, pet policies and that sort of thing. I think one of the things that came up that really relates to kind of an understanding of what's going to create a more successful foundation for the pets is understanding what their condition is. So things like vaccinations, prior injuries, issues that have occurred in terms of aggression, behavior, that type of thing, interactions with other pets and that sort of thing. So I wanted to this kind of dovetails with the question that was asked in chat. Can you guys talk a little bit? And Genevieve, I think you even spoke about kind of an evaluation over the phone with folks that have pets. Your pet policies, your intake procedures for pets, just to better understand what's needed as pets come into the facilities.
In our program, we do homeless call us. A lot of first responders, social workers, food banks, they know who we are because we've made sure that people know how to get in touch with us. So we do this intake before, then we verify that they are homeless. And that happens by calling that social worker. Maybe it's a police officer, maybe it's somebody at the food bank or a soup kitchen, or at the domestic violence shelter, or at the homeless shelter. Sometimes it is that these people are so remote and in encampments that they don't go into town a lot, and they don't have interaction with those kinds of resources. So they'll take a picture of the inside of their vehicle, or their camp, their tent, or their, wherever they are located. And that will, I let my case managers use their discretion. So then what happens then is that my group, once we get that verification, then we call the nearest hospital that has worked with us. If there isn't one, it's a new community that we've never worked in before, they cold call until they find a hospital that'll work with us at a discount, knowing that we're going to pay at time of service. So we approve a basic exam. We're going to pay for whatever that cost is for that. Then once we let that person know, the homeless person, okay, we just have approval for you to go to XYZ hospital. You make the appointment, because we don't know if you're going to have trouble getting transportation there, if you're going to, what your situation is. So we'll let you make the appointment, but the hospital knows that you're coming in, who you are, who your animal is, what kind of breed, if it's been spayed, neuter, if it needs vaccination. The hospital already knows this information. So they make the appointment. Once they're there and the doctor has done the basic exam, if there is something else that needs to happen, they call us. We're going to need to do an x-ray. We're going to need to do whatever blood work, whatever the situation is for whatever the problem is with that particular pet. We then approve the extra amount. They give us an estimate. And then as they are leaving the hospital, we're giving them a credit card number and paying for the services. Sometimes it takes a few days. Usually if it's a real emergency, like blood from an orifice, a broken bone, or a gash, a wound of some kind, we'll get that animal in that day. But sometimes it takes up to 12 days because so many of the hospitals are so overbooked and understaffed, just like we are. It may take the average could be up to 12 days before we are actually paying for it. From the time that person calls until the time we pay that hospital invoice, it could be up to 12 days because we aren't getting the callbacks from the social workers to verify that they're homeless. So that's kind of how we set up the hospital. We need to talk to the homeless person, and then we will verify. So if anybody is wanting to do this, work with us, they can email us at info@petsofthehomeless.org, and we can send them our policies and procedures, because I went through that pretty fast. So you'll know exactly what we treat, what we don't treat, and how we work it.
If I could add something, Susan, I think
Definitely.
this is a place where we've been having a lot of conversation. All of our shelter referrals go through our coordinated entry program. And so the coordinated entry program is a one-stop intake, assessment, and referral, and they do all of our 100% of our shelter referrals. So we need to work with them to add information to their screening to make sure that people are getting appropriately referred to this shelter and animals are getting appropriately referred to this shelter. Because what we recognize is that not all shelters are a good fit for all people. So we need to have some basic assessment of the condition of the animal, but we also need to know if the person who's looking for a referral might be triggered by living with animals, then also not a good referral. If the animal has special needs or isn't good with other animals in a congregate setting, also not a good referral. So it's a multifaceted kind of conversation about whether this animal and their person is going to be a good fit in the current shelter environment that's going on with that population there at that time. So it's definitely something we're thinking through and working on.
Yeah, thank you, Kirsten. I think we have time for one more question. I saw Artisha had her hand up. Do you still have a question?
I do. I was like, please, because I'm from LA, but I'm from Lhasa, and Andrea, we work through paths. So that's why I was just like, oh, this is really interesting. First off, I want to thank you guys for your resources, because we do come across a lot of clients who do have animals, and it's hard for them to get into any type of unit. And just to hear this conversation, it makes me wonder, what if we can kind of coordinate some type of thing where some shelters who do or who don't have animals, what if we're able to hire somebody who has some type of experience dealing with animals? Because I am looking at it from both perspectives, Miss Kirsten, like how you said, you do have people who, do suffer from that, along with how we do have ADA units for those who have, any type of vision impairment or, hearing or, mobility. How is it that, how can we have one of those type of units where, one is strictly for animals, or a unit is designed for animals, along with how we do have, some type of transportation? How about we can hire people who deal with animals, along with, that's why it's like we're both meeting everybody halfway versus just saying, no, we don't deal with this, or, oh, no, we only cater to this. How can we come to a medium where we can have these conversations at the table and say, not only are we providing services for homeless services, we're also providing jobs and careers for those who have this ability to bring this to the table. That's it.
Andrea, did you want to respond? I see you're off mute.
Oh, yeah. Again, I feel like it's the more conversations we're having and making this become more of a norm, it's important. I feel like to get to that point, it's going to take a lot of talking, a lot of educating to get us to that point. Some of the things that we've done, within my shelter, because I've experienced on both ends, right? Like we try to create a low barrier environment and meet people where they're at and meet their animals where they're at when they come in. But, trying to look at all 6 of my shelters are super different. So just looking at what does that look like for the here and the now? How could we create, so in some of my shelters, they're like cubicle type settings. So what we said is, why don't we get the doggy gates to put in the cubicle? And then, you know how you can go in and out. And then, when people need to go take their shower, they can leave them in. They're safe. They're not running in and out. Other people don't have to be scared of a dog running in and out, and they don't, and they can take a step away. It's like us in our houses, our apartments or whatever, right? Like, we close the door. We don't want our dogs to always be in the bathroom with us or whatever the case. But just trying to figure out, thinking outside the box, being creative, what does that look like for the environment that you're currently in right now? You know what I'm saying? And then educating your team and your staff, or, a couple of my shelters, we have a dog park, right? So that has, oh my God, blessed us so much to be able to have a enclosed, gated, safe area that has dog park, that has that space where if there is a bigger type dog, or, or if we need to put the dog in the dog park so he can run around and they're not in a small enclosed space, because guess what? They start barking, you keep them in the cubicles, you keep them in the small space, they start barking. Now you got the next door neighbor, or, our other guest, he's barking, and get this dog out of here. And now you got to de-escalate, and so it's just, we got to get ahead of the game to say, okay, what could we do? We don't want to leave the dog in here. In some cases, some dogs are quiet. You could put the gate, in some cases, let's have the dog be in the dog park, communicate, let's create goals, let's create systems, let's create ideas and think outside the box. And then in other cases where some of these shelters and places are being built, for me, like I said, we got dog parks in a couple of our places, I know you guys mentioned kennels and things like that. So what does it look like to create a pet friendly environment, as well as, we're creating a healthy environment for our clients and a pet friendly environment? It coincides. It all, like, we got to start thinking outside the box. We got to start bringing the people who are professionals into these conversations, and the people specifically who are in these shelters or on the ground level, because that's what I see a lot. Decisions are being made with people that are not in the ground level, that see what's going on, or that wait a minute, this is what happens when you got too many, and having those conversations to brainstorm.
So sadly, we have come to the end of the session. I want to thank Andrea, Kirsten, and Genevieve for all of your insights today. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I hope it's been helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, Genevieve. Bye-bye.
Bye.